Can I, we relax those rules according to board policy for,
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're
Well,
going,
you don't want to follow board policy, that is.
well, according to 8140 is what you're
Yes.
saying?
yeah.
Okay.
So everybody, if you have something to say, I know it's just,
No, I was just getting clarification. I guess I missed.
yeah. So that's what we're doing.
I appreciate that.
So my remarks on Monday, Sam, strike them off the record. We're back to here. So anyways, getting started, I'll turn it over to you, Sarah. We'll get started right away on purchases over 20,000.
One this month, and we have Sheila Price here to talk about it. It's some refrigeration work for the nutrition services department. And you can see loaded in the agenda, we've got the quotes and then her summary and what she is recommending. Do you have anything that you want to say or talk about?
No, just to clarify, I think it's clear, but the CoolSys CRM quote did not include the electrical, so we had gotten a quote just for the electrical piece, and so the total on the summary sheet includes the United Electric along with the CoolSys quote as a total.
Were you scared?
No.
So the United Electric estimate goes along with the cool system.
Yeah.
And so you're recommending,
Yeah, so, Moss and CoolSys quote were within, I think, just here, like around $2,000 difference. I am actually recommending, Moss, which was the higher of the two, simply because there was a little bit of a difference in the, warranty, a 5-year compressor versus a 1-year. And then also Moss, the unit, they anticipate the units to be down for about a 24-hour period of time, which means we would need to have an alternate location for storing anything that's in the units at that time. So they do have a refrigerated trailer that they would provide to us at no additional cost as well.
So if I'm paraphrasing, better warranty, better service potentially because they're local. And, there is a benefit of essentially no downtime where we don't really have, food spoilage. I mean,
Yeah, it's either the trailer that could be provided, or we might have to rent
okay.
a trailer
At an
for
additional
temporary
cost.
storage.
So in the, Moss will includes electrical too, or?
Yeah.
So then,
So I think if you look at the comparison summary, it will kind of list any, like the warranty information,
Right.
as well as the exclusions.
I support that recommendation personally.
Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, if I'm, as long as I'm reading this correctly, Moss seems like a great decision.
David, you got anything from online?
No, works for me.
All right, my opinion is about the same as well, so I think we can move that forward Monday night. The whole thing, correct?
Yeah, just,
You need to try.
no,
the only other thing that we don't have another purchase on here, but I wanted to give a heads up that you'll see the cost of educator effectiveness come through, and that is over 20,000, and we do get reimbursed for that through the DPI grant. So educator effectiveness is what we use to evaluate teachers, and it's a big program.
And then we're reimbursed as well. So.
Yes, we're reimbursed each year.
Any questions on that? All right, seeing none, we will go to, budget discussion.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
So the final numbers came in for the different things that we were waiting on. So we have our final, property value amount and the final equalization aid amount, and we have our student count. So those were the last pieces that we needed to finish the revenue limit worksheet. So the final copy of that is in, the agenda. And there were a few changes, not anything big. So, property values increased just a small amount more, but still the overall increase for the district was 6%. And then our equalization aid decreased by $55,000. So that was a tiny amount compared to what the increase was. So
Hey, Sarah, I'm not seeing if you're presenting from a presentation. I'm not seeing it right now. Okay, appreciate it.
sorry, I didn't
Thanks.
click on it. The
Thank you.
biggest change, oh yeah, you're welcome. The biggest change was that we had been projecting a decline of 60 FTE for students, and we actually came in at 101 less. So that number was a bigger number than what we were anticipating. And the way that the formula works, we have that hold harmless exemption. And so the revenue actually increased just a little bit in this first year, but that will impact us in years following. So bottom line, once we got all of the final numbers, the revenue for Fund 10 increased by just under $13,000. Otherwise, the budget stayed the same from last month. I included a budget booklet here, which I will include at the board meeting as well. I made a couple changes to it already, but it'll be pretty much the same, and it has some more information and some more explanations for different things about the budget and school finance, if anybody's interested in reading that. And I think if I have anything else to add. I think if you just look at the final budget though for DPI, like this is what we've been looking at each month, just with those changes to the Fund 10 revenue. And the final amount for our debt service, I should say that changed just a little bit as well.
So the DPI, you said the DPI, what were the DPI changes specifically?
To that revenue limit.
Yeah.
Specifically, if we look at line, well, the first thing is if you look on the very first page, and there's those two boxes that show the school FTEs, you see we went from 3405 to 3304, so we dropped 101. That was the first big change.
30, I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, I wish I had a way to like present, but
I happen to find it.
Yeah.
So it's these two boxes.
Okay.
So in the top box, 34.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
So, okay, those are the changes that,
so that directly impacts our revenue because we get that number multiplied by the per pupil amount. And then over in that box to the right, the green box, 3373, that's the number that you use to calculate the per pupil aid. That's like the categorical aid. So that went down as well. And then property values here, those went up. They'd already increased quite a bit, and they increased an additional $5.4 million after the estimate that we got in July. But the overall increase is still about 6%. And then if we go down,
the increase to,
so it increased by 6%. So now we're at this number here.
You mean like the total amount that is coming in when you take into
Okay.
account how many students there are versus?
No, the total property values for the
Oh.
district.
so property values went up.
Yeah, across the district, they went up 6% on average. And then if you look at the different municipalities, it varies a lot.
So that would cause our mill rate to go down.
Right. So the weird thing is all of them should I think all of the property taxes would go down a little bit this year. Some though may go up depending on
Okay.
how the assessments work out. If we look then at, if you look at 12A on page 2, that shows the equalization aid amount. And that amount changed just a little bit as well. So it's a big increase over last year. I think we talked about that at one of our meetings because a couple things, the state put a little bit more funding into equalization aid, and then because Milwaukee Public Schools lost some of their aid, that put it back in the pot, and we ended up with a pretty big increase this year.
Okay.
And the estimate compared to the final was the same, except it decreased by $55,000. So it was really close.
Hey,
So
Sarah,
Go ahead.
just a comment. I know that we have the budget hearing on Monday, and you probably live and breathe this spreadsheet, so you don't remember where things are because you know where things are. But for the benefit of the budget hearing, if there's a way that you can design this to highlight those lines when you're speaking of them, because there's a lot of numbers on here, and I too love spreadsheets, and nobody can follow mine. I just comment that it might be helpful for the inexperienced observer and me, for that matter, for you to try to highlight those sections during the budget presentation, if that's possible. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And I also have a presentation for Monday, so I won't make you look at the spreadsheet on Monday.
Okay, that's even better.
So I think that those were the only lines that actually changed, but it did bring our mill rate then to $5.99.
Okay.
Any further questions, Craig?
Are we discussing all of those slides or? As far as what's in the booklet or,
You mean on Monday?
well, no, are all those?
That's up to you. I can talk about it if you want me to. but I
Okay.
don't have to.
I guess I was a little confused, why under the, draft budget publication, why are we not budgeting anything for the capital projects fund?
So couple reasons. We haven't identified anything that we're going to use that money specifically for this year. So that's a good point. That doesn't mean that we can't use that, but some of that has been paused a little bit because we're going through this big facility study. But that is a good point.
Would it be, capital, like I said, capital project would be different from repairs and maintenance, is what I'm understanding, right?
Right. And so some of that we do through Fund 10, and then this Fund 46 is separate from that. And we have used a little bit of those funds before, but we haven't identified any projects that we would use those funds.
So at this point, we're kind of in a holding pattern as far as the project, capital projects for next year is what this would be, correct?
For the year we're in right now.
For the
Yeah.
year, and we haven't identified an immediate need for, let's say, a cooler that goes down, or aside from our previous discussion.
Well, we have like our regular maintenance and operations budget. This is kind of for above and beyond that. Like if we had something big that we needed done, that's really what those funds are for.
Okay, sure.
Good question, Craig. Sam, you got any?
Nope, I don't think so. That was, yeah.
I did have one other quick question. The total expenditures on the same sheet, the total expenditures and other financing uses. We have audited, unaudited, and budget, for across the board there. There is quite a bit of a jump, a difference between the 2023 and 2024 years.
You mean from this year and last year?
Yes, yeah.
Right. So the bulk of that, I mean, we provided a 3.75% increase on all wages. We started a new support staff compensation model, which did come at a cost. And then our health insurance had a 7% increase. That's a lot of it. Transportation went up by, I hate to even say because I might say the wrong number, but I think it was like 4.5%. So we had increases.
Well, can you, I don't mean to put you on the spot, this interfund transfer, of like six million, we had to pay something out, I take it?
That is the transfer that goes to Fund 27, which is special
Okay.
education.
Okay. Very good. And I'm just trying to look at the booklet. I think they had another question on that. So especially, I'm seeing I'm trying to wrap my mind around the voucher impact on the mill rate. I think it's slide 8. And I think your explanation basically says that state aid, the district, it's allotted a certain amount of state aid. And then out of that, the state does it for us. They remove the portion that is due via vouchers within the district, right? So that's coming out of dollars that we would normally see as far as revenue. And then the mill rate is then adjusted for that same amount. Because we still have to levy that amount locally.
Okay.
And, but that just means that there's just less of it that okay. Got it.
Right, so I think what I was trying to show here is that when we say our mill rate is $5.99, $1.26 of that goes toward those school vouchers. So that full amount doesn't go toward the operations of the district. So it was about $4.2 million, the vouchers, yeah, 4.2. And so we actually will pay that.
Okay, thank you.
David, any comments or questions?
No, and I'm sure it's in here somewhere, Sarah, you're going to forecast what our deficit is and our proposed mill rate for next year. I assume those are going to be punchlines on Monday night.
Yeah, definitely. And so the proposed or the projected deficit is $5.4 million and the mill rate will be $5.99.
Okay.
Um,
And in years past, when we've discussed the 599, and this is going back to what, as I recall, Tony's comments, and they were much more informed than mine. He always wanted to take it back to what we told the taxpayers at the last referendum and how much we're setting aside for a rainy day. And the 599 is, I believe, Sarah and Jared, well below what we're allowed. And I'm not trying to say increase it. I think we're all going to be talking about an operational referendum, but there were a lot of very intentional and intelligent decisions made over the last 3 or 4 years with the referendum that passed in how to what do you want to say? Minimize the speed at which we're going to have to feel some significant pain. And I put it that way, Sarah and Jared, to ask the question, not that I have anything wrong with 599, and nor should the taxpayers for that matter, but what are other considerations to 599 that were allowed within the law, were allowed within their last referendum, and that were allowed for proper fiscal planning in the event that a referendum doesn't pass. Could we do 699? I'm not advocating it. I'm asking the question. What are our options when we're talking about levers here? I understand the spreadsheet and where we arrive at the number, but we can put some of those funds into, I'm going to say 27, Sarah, but you're going to correct me. That there's options here that we should consider as opposed to just trying to fund 10. Given that Tony was more of the expert on this, as far as my experience goes, and Jared and Sarah, you're even more so than Tony. Tell us what our options were as far as how you arrived at the 599 and what that means to us as we're considering future planning efforts, both fiscal and planning, et cetera.
Yes, so I think what I would start with saying is that the mill rate is really set by the state. So the only way that a school district can change that is through a referendum. Or you can levy extra funds for debt, which we're doing. Or Fund 80, which is the community services fund. That fund is outside of the revenue limit. Other than that, the only way to change the mill rate or increase the tax levy is through a referendum. So we don't have a whole lot of control over what that final mill rate number is. We have a minimal amount of control over that. The other thing that I would say is the mill rate itself, districts forever used that as like, that's what people pay for property taxes, is kind of like, I'm trying to think, like that was the gate that we used. But it's changed a lot in the last few years because property values have increased so much. So when you look at the total levy for the school district, and I have this in the slide for Monday, but I don't have it for tonight. But if you look at the school or the tax levy for the last like 6 years, it's remained really steady. It's changed just a little bit. This year it's 200,000 roughly less than last year. So what that means is that while the mill rate's going down, what the average person is paying in property taxes probably hasn't changed that much. I don't know if that's helpful.
Despite that the property values have gone up.
Right.
Right, so like where your house used to maybe be worth 150,000 and now they're valuing it at 300,000, and the mill rate used to be 898 and now it's 599. Some people probably have seen a tax increase.
That's what
And
Yeah,
I'm going to say that, well, I don't want to say that I understand mill rates. That would be a real stretch. Let me just say that I recognize that just because my assessed value goes up doesn't necessarily mean that my taxes go up unless my assessed value goes up compared to everybody else who's been reassessed, or the total taxable of properties available in the district. But you're just saying that between all the calculations in the spreadsheet and our revenue limit per student, and we divide it by the value of the property, the $3 billion, we end up at 599, and we're kind of locked there. And doing anything above, to 6.25 or 6.5 to squirrel away a half a point in the levy for a rainy day just isn't an option. It may have been in the past because we were operating under possibly different circumstances or under past referendums. But as far as we're concerned today, this is just simple math. We can take in so much revenue and we divide it by so much assessed value in the district, and that yields 5.99. And there's almost zero adjustment that we can make to that. That's just a definitive math fact.
that's correct.
Okay.
Right, as far as rainy day is concerned. I think what the graph on page 7 is kind of depicting is that we're spending, fund balance in 23, 24 and 24, 25. And that's not ideal. And I just, for the record, I just wanted to say that I have vocalized the desire to review building budgets and see where there could be some concessions if possible, or there should be some tightening of the belt if possible, in the event that a referendum does not pass, that we can keep as many staff and resources in the classroom as long as possible.
So what's our budgets for our buildings?
I'm gonna give you a rough number, but I would say roughly for the actual physical buildings we have, it's around 600,000.
You got a $7 million deficit.
I realize that. I realize that. And that's not, that fact isn't lost on me.
Here's the point. We cut the entire budget. 600,000. Let's say Sarah's wrong and it's 800,000. We still have $6 million in deficit. The budgets, and I understand where you're going with this and I understand tightening our belt, right?
Mhm.
But 70-80% of our budget is staff. It's gonna hit staff.
Because I take a step back and I want to be cautious about, and at least have a discussion at some point about it. And that's all I'm suggesting.
Totally agree, but we cut that other 20%, we cut whatever. We still are gonna cut staff. It's just the reality of the situation. We've got enough of a deficit here. We can shut down every other penny we spend. We're still doing the staff.
Fred, if I may, when I was in private industry for a large petrochemical company, there wasn't a year that didn't go by where the CEOs from Houston walked in and told my boss to shave his maintenance budget by 10%. When COVID hit, and I'm on the YMCA board, the CEO went to his staff and said, okay, everybody tighten your belts. Everybody's got to figure out a way to save 25%. In the spirit of working towards what we know is a deficit budget, it's not that I think that there's a lot of meat on this bone, but I'd be interested, I think, as Craig is saying, in asking, we understand that you're not going to save your way to a $5 million savings, but if every school was told, find 10% to shave out of your budget, at least it'd be a good faith effort, which is frequently attempted in private industry. I recognize we're not going to get the 5 million, and we could throw up our hands and say, well, if we're not going to get the 5, then why bother? But at the same time, coming from private industry, when austerity measures are necessary, you implement austerity measures. Okay, you just don't run faster at the cliff. So I don't know where the happy medium is there. I don't want to start, not fixing things that are broken and putting yellow tape over water fountains and not fixing trip hazards on the carpet and not mowing the lawn or repairing a roof. At the same time, I don't think it's entirely appropriate to say, well, we can't get to the 6 million, so let's just keep on going the way we've been going. And Craig, I don't know if that echoes your sentiments or waters them down. I just think it's an appropriate way to look at it.
If I may, gentlemen, I want to share with you, that's what we've been doing already. There's a reason we have deferred maintenance. There's a reason we haven't been doing curriculum, and there's a reason we haven't been doing a lot of other things like professional development. It is because we've been shaving. It's just, we don't come to the board or the community and say, hey, we cut a whole bunch here. We just try to make it work so we can operate.
And
Jared, you can see the parking lot. I mean, you can see where you can see where we made the cuts.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would highlight that for my perspective, Jared, that's an acceptable statement from you to me. And I trust that that's actually what's been going on. It wouldn't be inappropriate on my perspective to highlight that fact. And that satisfies me. Craig may still want to dig deeper, but I just want to hear that we've been doing what we can with the dials that we can turn to slow this descent. And that I'm good with that comment along with Fred's. I have no others, but I just wanted to make sure that we highlight that from my perspective and from the perspective of a taxpayer, that we're not being irresponsible and saying, oh, don't worry about it, the taxpayers are going to bail us out when we totally run out of money.
Right. The only place that we really haven't been doing that is staffing. since I've gotten here, we've also tried to just deal with staffing by cutting to get the other things done that we wanted to get done, taking face-to-face supports from the classroom, moving them to other supports. We could have just saved money in those areas, but I don't think that we would be where we are today with some of the progress we've been making if we had made that choice. So that's the only choice that we really could have made differently to get us into a different position. The building budgets themselves are minuscule. Could we do less? Sure. I mean, I can always, like I said, I can operate with $7 million less too. It just takes a lot of cutting programs, cutting staff, and getting into that model. It just tells, you guys just have to tell me what you want.
I guess the spirit of my comments are, I think David Trader did a pretty good job of summing things up a little bit. But the spirit of my comments are that I feel like, it's nice to be in on that part of the loop on those kinds of things. As well as, to know that these are the areas that you're focusing on and making some changes budget wise. And at least spurring some sort of a conversation that the fiscal committee gets a look at when it comes to those dollars. And otherwise they're just numbers on a page, and it doesn't mean a heck of a lot to people if they don't know the efforts that you are making to be responsible. And that's pretty much it.
So I think, Craig, I asked you at a couple meetings, like I just need to know what exactly that you'd like to see. I'm happy to provide it. And I think where we had left it is we were going to meet one-on-one. And then I don't know how, like that fell off somewhere.
Yeah. Things get very crazy, so.
Right. But I'm certainly happy to sit down and we can look at that or bring something here.
I would prefer that we bring something here, but it's after the fact at this point. Now it's a matter of, hey, this is the budget. I had been asking since May, and
I'm still not clear though what you would.
Discretionary spending in the building budgets is what I was asking.
So you want to see line items like I'm not sure.
Right, but I think we're beating a dead horse at that. But I'm just saying at least some sort of a review somewhere. I would prefer.
Yeah. And Craig, I'll echo those, but I still look at bigger buckets, Sarah. If there is a specific cost center for classroom supplies or cleaning supplies or I don't know what line items or cost centers you have, I'm certainly wouldn't be interested in reviewing any one of them down to the point of which item we purchased from which vendor for what price per unit. But it'd sure be nice to see that if the budget last year was $50,000, that this year's budget is $45,000. And if that's on a cost center basis, I'd be happy with that. Craig may want more granularity, but this goes back to the previous example I gave when the CEOs from Houston showed up in my boss's office and said, shave your maintenance budget by 10%. They didn't care what he wasn't paying for, whether it was grease, whether it was bearings, or whether it was, paint. They just wanted to see a reduction of 10%. That's my world. And I would be happy and interested in seeing that. I'll say similar to Craig. I don't need to go any deeper than that, but Craig may have more interest in that than I do. So that's just my 2 cents on the subject. And Jared, you say it's happening. I trust that it is.
Different than the variance report is what I'm asking. So we do the variance report each month, which does kind of show that it shows the last 3 years in each object and source. So I guess like what in addition to that?
One of the things that we established when I had run this committee, Sarah, you and I sat down, we started to put a calendar together. one of the things on this calendar were our large budget contracts. One of these contracts would come up for renewal, where we would have those, and we started talking about how to walk back 2 to 3 months before those would come up for renewal, so that we can say, okay, if you know, our heating, air conditioning units, whatever, would be up for renewal in May. In February, we could say, hey, look, we know this is coming up in May, here are the dollars we're talking about and stuff like this. And we have those big contracts, then you could start looking at those and saying, okay, if we need to shave 10%, here's some of the bigger numbers that we have, we're going through like this. Those are the things that, you know, this committee can look at, and I think should, and we had talked about, you know, doing that. Rather than getting into line items of the pencil budget, we can take a look at those really big contracts that we have, that's where the bulk of our money's gonna go, besides staff. And look at those sorts of things, and again, that's would be my recommendation, is look at our contracts. What are our largest vendors? You know, what are we spending on them? How long is the contract? You know, there are other options. We do that when the busing contract comes up. There's no reason we can't do that with anything else.
So Sam, I want to get to Sam. He had his hand up here and wanted to go now.
Oh,
So,
yeah, no. It's
Sam,
fine. When I raised my hand originally, I was gonna say, I thought David summed it up really well, from the discussion that I've heard over the past couple of fiscal meetings we've had. I do agree with Craig. You know, it would be nice to have that information, even if the information is about a small amount of money in the big scheme of things. I think there's an element of stewardship and governance, if you want to call it that. You know, I think there's a philosophy of stewardship and governance where it's good to have the ability to get your eyes on that, not for the sake of, you know, picking away at things, but just for the sake of being able to see it. I think that's always good. But I think the way that David put it, really saying like, hey, like general categories, like what's the expenditure for in this area, in addition to some of those larger expenditures like Brett was talking about. I think that would be helpful, again, if nothing else, as kind of a good faith show, not just like in the context of the board, but also in the context of the community and the board and everyone. I think that having that open communication, like I said a few months ago when I started, I think clarity is something that goes a long way for people feeling comfortable. And really, at the end of the day, the board, the administration, and the community, it's about a relationship. And, you know, clear communication is where a good relationship lies.
So, and thank you for the comments. I guess I got 2 questions just to kind of wrap this up a little bit in essence of time, but 2 questions that I have coming out of this. First and foremost, I agree with both of you, or all 3 of you, actually, that David summed it up really nice. So my question first would be to Sam and Craig. If it was put into bigger bucket items, right? You know, year over year, this is what office supplies were, this is what paper was, this is whatever. Does that suffice, or does it have to be a line by line? Craig, you were before saying, no, the big buckets are fine, right?
Well, what, I think we're talking about 2 different things. I believe David Trader's, comment was to line items, but not down to like the individual purchase, items that we're talking about. Like, we don't need to know.
Sure.
Like, we
Yeah.
spent X amount of money on mops last month.
Yeah, Dave called it a bucket. You're calling it a line, but I think we're saying this, I
Correct.
think we're saying the same thing.
We're getting closer.
Okay.
It would be nice to see it broken out by building. You know, so that this is what each building ends up spending
Sure.
those dollars on. And go from there.
And then my next question would be to Sarah then, because I'm a big fan of not jumping over dollars to save pennies, right? So is putting together something like that gonna cost you additional staff, 20 hours a week in overtime?
I
Where does it-
just need to understand exactly what you want. So if you're asking for something that looks like the variance report, only it's broken out by building, yes, I can do that. That would not be a difficult ask. Other than that, I guess I still am not completely clear on what you're asking for.
Sure. I mean, I'd imagine that, building administrators submit a budget every year.
That's correct.
Okay, what does that look like? I mean, that's where I would start. That's kind of what I'm would like to look at. When they break that down, what does that look like? What administrators are submitting to the business office for their budgets.
And Sarah, do you have any other questions on?
Or do you want to just see the budget or you want it to be like,
I want to see their budget.
okay, I think we can do that.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rick, Sam, and Dave, and Fred, for that matter. We're gonna move forward then, to the referendum planning discussion. This will be the fun.
The subcommittee met last Friday, and so I thought today we could go through what we had talked about in that meeting to kind of set the stage and then also let you know what came out of that meeting. So I included the slideshow that we looked at during that meeting. And if we're looking at this first slide that I just brought up, this is a kind of a breakdown of some of the larger expenditures that the district had year over year. This definitely is not all the expenses, but it's some of the big things that go into like the overall increase from year to year. So we have this wonky year in there for COVID where things were really weird, and really there's at least 3 years that have been impacted by COVID and ESSER. So some of it is a little bit weird, but you can see a pattern. I mean, wages go up every year. We know that. Benefits go up every year. We know that. Transportation goes up, except for that weird COVID year. Utilities have been steadily increasing. And then our transfer for Fund 27 has been steadily increasing as well. So those kind of big buckets of money play a large role in why you see a bottom line increase from year to year. If we look at the next slide, this slide was just kind of breaking out what we have for revenue, kind of like what we were talking about earlier for this year. So we have a history of what the district has received through the revenue limit. So the equalization aid amount, which has, I mean, for a long time, it was pretty much the same. And then it started going up a little bit. And now this year is a high year. It's hard to say how next year will look. The overall Fund 10 tax levy went up in these years here because we had the operational referendum, and then you see it's gone back down again. And when we go to this voucher column, that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. It looks like, oh yeah, like our Fund 10 tax levy has gone down, but what we actually
Join the meeting.
what we actually have available for operations has gone down as well. So I think that's what I was getting at with this slide. I got distracted, but the 10-year increase in revenue without, like, we have these years that went up because of the referendum. But if we look at 2015 and then we look at 2024, it's a 5% increase. And we all know that inflation has been significantly higher than that. And then here's what I was talking about before I did have this slide. So this is our mill rate history and our total tax levy history. So mill rate is going down quite a lot. The total tax levy is staying pretty consistent. And then I put in here, this is the mill rate comparison for districts that are surrounding us. And it's last year's data because we don't have this year's data available quite yet. But you can kind of see where Watertown falls and where the average is. We're not way out of line, but we are definitely lower than the average. And then I had the fund balance history again. And then these were just my notes, but I put them in here just as we're thinking about planning for the future. We know that last year we came in at a $3.2 million deficit. This year we're projecting about $5.4 million. And so if we're just thinking about next year, even if we give a 3% increase in wages, going to be at least another $1 million added onto the budget. That's about where CPI is running right now, 3.5%. So just to think toward the future, if we end up at a $5 million deficit this year, we can know we're going to be at least at $6 million next year. So that's what we talked about. And then we also talked about the idea of when we go to referendum this time, going for a recurring referendum instead of a non-recurring referendum. And the strategy behind that would be, as our deficits are getting bigger, kind of gives you a bigger and bigger cliff every time a referendum ends. So last time our referendum ended at $3.9 million. This time our referendum, that would be a step-up referendum for 5 years, would probably end at 8 million. So that's a huge amount. It's becoming a big percentage of the overall budget. So if we go out for recurring referendum, that would close that gap. So that's not saying we would never, ever need more money, but it's saying that if we were to go to referendum in 8 years, it would be for a smaller amount than what we would be asking for if we had done a non-recurring. And so we were talking about going to a recurring referendum for $7 million a year, which would be slightly more than what we think we would need in the first 2 years. And then probably right about what we would need for year 3, maybe year 4. And then hopefully we can, with some careful planning and preparation and reductions in budget, we could carry that referendum out for a long time, potentially 8 years, 10 years, depending on how we managed our budget. So that is what we were talking about at planning, or the subcommittee of planning, to which everybody agreed. And then the other part of that we talked about was utilizing the debt that falls off, which we talked about a little bit here at Fiscal before. So we know that we have been prepaying some debt. That debt's almost paid off. As that debt falls off, it leaves a little bit of room in the mill rate. And so it would make the mill rate impact of a $7 million recurring referendum 70 cents. And that is what the planning committee, the subcommittee of the planning committee is recommending.
70 cents per thousand.
70 cents on the mill. So yes, that's 70 cents. So instead of $5.99, we will be looking at $6.69.
Which still has us below last year's average.
Correct. And definitely lower than the historic average.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So when it
Just
comes to,
just a clarification. If you're talking, let's say interest rates, bankers like to talk points. If we're talking mill rate, is it dollars or is it, I just want to be consistent. I mean, I know what it is, but on your previous slide, Sarah, you had dollars. And if dollars, the language, part of it is just, there's very few taxpayers who see anything on this except for my taxes are going to go up. So here you're represented as 5.99, yet you just said 70 cents. And so I'm not saying that this is a problem. It's just semantics, but we need to be consistent. We need to be accurate because we get burnt on misstatements that aren't entirely non-factual, but people like to try to hang us on, well, you said mine was only going to go up 70 cents. No, we said it was going to go up 70 points. That's not 70 cents. So we have to be careful in that. And I'm going to look to you and Jared to be the what do you want to call the guidance on that, just to make sure that we're using the right terminology, because it does get down to that level of nitty gritty when we're putting out documents to the taxpayers as to what we're asking for. So I just want to make sure that we're being consistent in our terminology. I hate to be a wonk on that stuff, but it does matter.
so
I
like,
think the thing that you might be needing clarification on is they both, if you use the terminology per mill, right? So 70 cents per mill and $5.99 per mill.
Jared, I agree. It's just that even last time, 5-7 years ago, people said, no, you lied. That's not what you guys put out. That's not what you told us. And you go back to the document and we did exactly what we said we were going to do. We didn't lie. But there's, I'll say, a significant portion of the population who thinks that we pulled a fast one on them because we confused them with a bunch of lingo. So what you don't want to do is get into confusing lingo. Okay. I'm letting you and Melissa know, you and Melissa and Sarah know, make sure you don't do that. Okay.
Well, I'm telling you that trying to do that is almost impossible, because for each person, right, it's not going to necessarily come out exactly the same. And that's because we're only part of the taxing entity. How much the assessment goes up or down in their own home, all those things make a difference. So people will have more than enough to want to say, you did me wrong. And we're never going to be able to be 100% accurate for them.
Well, can I suggest something?
Yeah, please, Greg.
Perhaps maybe, I mean, we have to kind of break this down. Like, in a way, mill rates for dummies in a way. And if I can understand what David is trying to explain is like, maybe just a small little worksheet, like included on on any type of, materials that are being marketed out there that kind of explain, okay, your mill rate, figure that out. You take your assessed value of your house and you divide that by 1,000, multiply that by your mill rate. That's what you're expected to pay in your taxes. And you can take the difference of the two and you could calculate what that increased cost will be. And at least then you'll know. But that transparency is probably more welcomed than people that don't have that understanding trying to figure it out on their own.
And
I
what I'm saying is on top of that, the thing is you can tell them based on today, if you do this, it's fine.
Right.
But next year, when you get your taxes, and somebody's going to say, I got my taxes and it went way up more than that because we did the calculations and everything. And it's like, well, yes, but we're only one part of the entity. Your assessed value may have changed. The amount of
Jared?
property within the district may have changed. There's so many things that we are not in charge of that make that literally impossible.
If I may, Jared, on this subject, Jared, Craig, David, for the three of us who've never ever been misunderstood ever in our entire life, ever. I will leave this to Melissa to craft the message, but Craig, I agree with yours. Jared, yours as well. But let's let Melissa do her job on this and make sure it passes the layman's version of the message. Because you're right, Jared, no matter what we say, we'll be wrong depending on certain point of views, to quote Star Wars. Sorry about that. This is why Melissa and whatever entity we decide to hire to help us with this is going to be important to make sure it's not just a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo to confuse somebody. Other than that, my comments on this, Jared, Sarah, and Mike and Fred, is that we have a good story to tell. I mean, it doesn't matter which one of these slides you put up there. We're certainly not being the irresponsible ones with the assets of our taxpayers. It's just a matter of trying to convince them that it's just not enough. I mean, and they know it's not enough because their gas bill went up and their auto insurance went up and their rent went up and their groceries went up. And hey, congratulations, your mill rate's going up too. That's why they call it inflation. I'm not saying it's an easy sell. I'm just saying is that we don't have anything to hide.
Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that part of the educational piece in that is that is the explanation of how inflation works in the school district, where certain things have increased that are outside of our control. And like transportation costs and just paper costs and whatever the case may be, those things are increasing, and despite our best attempts to try to adjust for that, they're out of our control.
Any other comments or questions under referendum planning? Sarah, I think you did a good job putting this together. I truly appreciate it.
Fred, or
David.
excuse me, Mike, and I wasn't at planning. I haven't read their minutes. Sarah, you'd mentioned the bogey, what we're going to ask for. Can you tell me just a couple of bullet points on why not higher, why not lower?
That's a good point. So I would say we don't want to go lower because we are hoping that this ask will get us out for quite a ways. And so really, this is a fairly conservative ask if we're going to do that. So we're talking about doing that in conjunction with really looking at the budget, really trying to make reductions where needed and really get this to carry us as long as possible. It is a little higher than what we think we're going to need right away. And that's on purpose, just because if we came in right exactly at what we thought we were going to need for next year, then we would be behind right from the beginning. So we'd go in a little bit higher and then hopefully really get that to stretch out for as long as we can. Does that answer your question?
It answers mine. I would put some more meat on it for those who either for Melissa's benefit for the one pager, or for people who might show up at the budget hearing this year, or at the polls, or start putting yard signs on that says vote no on referendum question 2. So we're going to have to put some real numbers behind that and some solid examples. Not just generality, Sarah. I mean, I'm comfortable with your answer. I want us to be meeting this head on, fully armed for some of the questions we're going to get.
So this reoccurring referendum, that continues in perpetuity, or is that?
Correct. It gets added into the revenue limit.
Okay, so unless the district decides to, I mean, obviously that's not gonna carry us through forever. So the district is gonna have to say, like, let's just say 8 years, 10 years out, we need another reoccurring referendum. So that would just stack on top of this one.
Right, but it's gonna be, and we talked about that, and that's a great question, Craig, and it's gonna be a much smaller ask. So like, right now, when we talked about it, with increasing budgets and things like that, what did it go up? Roughly 4 million deficit, 3 million, somewhere in there, just in 5 years. And all of a sudden, we're asking for 7 million, right, per year. And we're hoping in 8, 9, 10 years, whatever the year is, when this does fall off, instead of having to come back and say, now, instead of 7, we need 15, we're hoping we'll come back and say, okay, 7 was good, but can we get 1 additional million or 2, whatever it is, to add for another 10 year or whatever. It's a smaller ask instead of going the full board, right? It'll be a little less.
So, I mean, it is part of the discussion then tonight, whether or not that's appropriate. I mean, whether or not this committee feels it's appropriate.
Well, I think that's what we were discussing more than communications. I think we're discussing is this the plan, because we don't
Right.
have a full plan yet. This was the plan that came out of the subcommittee, and this was the way that they wanted to proceed, but then it's for discussion.
Okay.
I would
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, Craig, if planning, who's probably given more thought to the overall impact of this than just the numbers, they're looking at services, they're looking at the maintenance of the buildings, they're looking at the strategic plan of the district. I would think that the planning committee had the more holistic view on this than we do. We're just kind of the numbers people here, but I don't think it needs our seal of approval to go to the full board for all 9 of us to ratify it. But I'm glad that it's being presented to us so that we can understand the intricacies of it. If we said that we disagreed, I don't think that it matters much. The planning committee might trump us on this one, in my opinion. And obviously the full board would trump all of us. So if planning is behind this and it meets Sarah's and Jared's financial needs to run the district, I'm comfortable with the way that it's been presented. But that's just me. If you have additional questions, that's not my position to tell you to be satisfied or not. I think it goes to the full board for more or less the same discussion, but Sarah had to present it to us just as a formality, if nothing else.
If I may also give a little bit more context, maybe for you, Craig, too, just to hear all the things we talked about. You know, just to, again, to reiterate why recurring and why this much. We wanted to make sure that we had a conservative ask because we knew that we were also going to be asking for capital, whether that's to restructure our district or even just to get some things done. We know that we need to fix some things because we've been deferring maintenance. So we want to go lower on the operational, pair that with some cuts, you know, especially if money doesn't come in from the state, and try to be a little leaner there because we know rather soon in the future we're going to ask for capital improvements too. So that was part of the reason of the lower ask. The reason we're asking for recurring over time and not a sunset is because we did a sunset last time, and you know, now we have to basically ask for, you know, not just 3.8 million, which is what we ended at. We have to ask for basically 7, and then 7, then 8 and 8. And then once that money's bore out, then we would have to ask for another 4 or 5 million on top of that 8. And it gets to be too expensive to do it any one time. So if we can do it now and we can get out that 8 years or so, then we will be able to, you know, discuss a little bit more at that time. Probably a referendum ask that's a lot less than 12, 15 million annually, right? And so that's part of that reason for that ask. But the other thing is because we know that we have a possible 10-year sequence coming up of different asks to try to get to a more efficient model. We just really had to think about how can we do this as efficiently and as conservatively as possible. So that's where we ended up with what we did. Hope that fills in some of the gap.
Yeah, further.
Yeah, well, I have some reservations about the, recurring referendum. Because a lot of things can change in our district in the next 10 years. And, you know, I just don't know what those would be, but.
I don't know what those would be to have our costs go down that much. I mean, costs can really keep rising. I haven't seen anything that takes it back to much lower costs. We're talking in the millions of dollars of cost. And honestly, when you see other school districts do this, and they keep doing a sunsetting one and a sunsetting one, they get themselves into really a really bad place. And I don't think it's really good fiscal management because costs keep going up. They have to do a very, very large ask. And it becomes almost self-defeatist and they end up having to totally change programming. That's what Fort had to do.
Jared, with this ask, is this, I know with the last one, if this is the upper limit, we can take less, we just can't take more, or we set the ask and we have to take that amount?
Well, if we take less, we're coming back sooner, right? I mean, unless things change dramatically at the state level and they start giving us a lot more money, which I don't see happening. I've got 15 years, almost 20 years of data that shows they're not funding schools to the level that we need, right? So we could ask for less, but we would be coming back sooner.
No.
We get. Go ahead. What? I missed what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, I think we ask, if we put this ask, right, and it passes. Maybe I'm using the wrong term. We could levy less, can't we?
So the district always has the option to levy less, but my understanding is that, let's say we asked for $7 million and then we levied less than that, you can't go back to 7 after that.
Craig, to your point, if things
That's correct.
change, we can levy less.
Right.
So we're not set at this and said, oh, we've got this money and we don't know what to do with it now. Because we've put in the work from PRA and these efficiencies have gained us all of this. So we can pull back on this if things change and we end up having less of a need for
That knows.
But remember, when we do that,
it.
then
Sure.
we
That's-
limit ourselves in the future for
Right.
We can do that.
Sam,
So if I'm understanding you correctly, let's say in some kind of like crazy scenario, Javier Milei takes over America. He just decides to invade us and he gets rid of everything, and all of a sudden, all of the costs start going down. Hopefully, we could wish. We can always lower things. We can adjust it as we go on back down. This is a conservative estimate. That's what you're saying, correct?
but once you lower.
You can't go back.
up.
Sure, that makes sense.
The
So you wanna
district
make
can
sure.
always levy less.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
don't have to levy to the max.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that makes sense. And then one other question, really quick. I'm new, and the fastest way to stop being stupid about something is to ask a stupid question. What's the difference between recurring and non-recurring for a levy rate? Because you guys have been talking about that a lot. I think I understand it, but I want to make sure I do.
It doesn't change the levy rate much right off the bat, but
Yeah.
it's put into the formula in a different way. So when you look at that revenue limit worksheet, if you do non-recurring, they add the funds right into your base revenue.
Gotcha.
And it's in there forever, but it will eventually be eroded by declining enrollment because it goes down every year right now, the way that we're declining in enrollment,
Sure.
unless that stops. If you ask for non-recurring, it gets put in lower on the revenue limit as like an exemption. It's like a one-time, this is your dollar amount, and it is that dollar amount. That doesn't change. So it doesn't necessarily change what your mill rate is, but it can change over time, just because that base revenue will change over time.
Okay.
If that makes sense. But then, if you ask for 4 years, in year 5, you have nothing.
I will say this, I have my reservations. I'm not really sure how I feel about a recurring referendum at this moment. My gut tells me, and my financial acumen tells me that is probably the best fiscal decision we can make for a school district to move forward with a reoccurring referendum. But I still have my reservations about it. I don't know how I feel.
So, two comments, and both actually right to you, but for everybody here. I totally get what you're saying, and a comment before about said no school district ever, which was funny, and I get it, and I'm looking at it too. So I'm gonna say that, I don't know how old you are, I'm not gonna give my exact age, but that ARP card is coming pretty quick, right? And to this point in my life, I have not seen enough of a change for me to say inflation isn't real, things don't get more expensive over time, things like that. So to me, it makes sense to say reoccurring and ask for less in 8 or 10 years than to do a sunset and ask for more in 5. So that's my opinion. I had something else I was gonna say. Oh, here's an idea. Are you comfortable with saying, hey, you can think about it?
Oh,
until
yeah,
Monday, right?
we
For
move,
sure.
we move forward with the recommendation for sure.
Excellent. Okay, that's what I was gonna say.
I'm still reserved about it though, because I don't know what to think. That, I didn't expect a recurring referendum. I don't know why I didn't think of that, that I wouldn't expect that, but, okay.
No, it blew me away Friday too. It took me a second to wrap my brain, but
I just don't know what the appetite from the community is on that. I just don't know.
I've never been asked to before.
yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think the best thing to do is have a conversation with the community about it, get people talking about what they would prefer, what they're interested in, have people, start to understand it, encourage people to talk to their friends and family about it. Because I think that, when I talk to people from all different sorts of walks of life, from different income strata, from different political backgrounds. And people, generally speaking, they want good education for their kids and they understand the importance of investing in that. I think people want to make sure that they're investing in that the way things are being invested is good. And I think that people want to make sure that the style that they're investing in is also sufficient, if that makes sense. So I think that having that conversation, getting that information out there, that's going to be the biggest piece. I think that the stuff that we talked about previously, Jared, about talking to the community, getting community input, and opening that up as much as possible is going to be huge.
Well, yeah, and to that point though, too, going along the lines of a reoccurring referendum, what might be beneficial in your educational piece that you might put out there is to say, here's how we've been able to make your previous referendum stretch as long as possible. And here's how we feel we can make this go as long as possible as well. So here's our track record. Please judge us on that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that falls back on what David was kind of saying earlier, right? Making sure communication is stepping forward with the right foot. It was a simple version of what you said, but yeah.
I agree with the communication pieces. 100%. I just want to make sure that this is the right ask. This is the path that the subcommittee put us on. We shared we were going to share this with you guys, and then if you approved of it, we would inform the board that this is the direction we're going. What we'll be looking for from the board in October or Monday, I would say, is a confirmation or a resolution to seek ballot language, right? And then Sarah and I will work with Quarles and Brady to get the ballot language ready for November. That gives us a really good long runway between November and April. And it's really not even April, right? It's like mid-February because people do absentee voting and that kind of stuff to really get the message out. The longer we delay or do those kinds of things too, we can still get the message out, but I think it would be really effective if we could stay on this timeline. So if there's something that you think we should change, we would really need to hear that tonight. But, I actually do think that this is a pretty good path. Not the first path of choice I had, but I understand it and I think it's a really good one. And Sarah really endorses it. So I appreciate her words as we met last. So.
All right. So I think from what I'm understanding, we're going to move forward with that resolution looking for language. I appreciate the discussion. Moving on, we're going to talk about the Allward Street property. Was it Jared that wanted to talk about that? Or was that you, Sarah?
It was.
I can talk about it, but Sarah also knows my backup plan in case I get waylaid here. So I'm trying to balance a couple of hats. My son was at regionals, and now he's getting dropped off at robotics, and I'm trying to cook dinner so that everything's ready when everybody's back. So I'm multi-hat chefing tonight. So
So what are we having?
well, we're having a whole bunch of stuff. We're having burgers, and I've got some red cabbage with sour red cabbage with some apples, and I've got some sweet potato fries and some other stuff that I'm putting together. So just something I can do while I'm talking on the phone here. A lot of cutting and oven work. So with that, here's the Allward Street property. Here's what I don't need. I don't need a decision to market it, and I don't need to know how much to market it for. The board's already decided that, right? We decided that a long time ago. So I know what I need to market it for because you guys gave me a pricing range, and I know that I have the permission to market it. But our contract with the current people has left. We've had a couple inquiries since that contract left. They were much lower inquiries than what we had, and they were only verbal inquiries. I asked people to write me up something, and at least as far as end of day today, when I did a spot check on my email, I didn't see any written offers come in. So here's the options that I have that I'd like you to think about and give me guidance on. Either we can stay with the same firm, same broker, and continue to have Brenda Slater do that and list it for us. We could use the same firm, but a local vendor. So use Realty Execs and ask our local who does commercial work, if any, and then I could go that route. Or I could open it up to RFP, bring everybody to the table, have them do some interviews with Sarah and I, tell them what our ask needs to be, and see if they're willing or want to help us with that and what their commission and or fees might be, fee structure might be. What are your thoughts and how would you guide me?
Let's open this one up. Right, right.
So the one question, that I would ask would be, what kind of time commitment do you feel would be involved with, an RFP? I mean, I feel like that might be the best good faith effort to let, local community have a crack at the opportunity.
I think because it's such a quick turnaround because of the holidays, we would probably bring you back something in our December meeting.
Okay.
Because between this meeting and our next board meeting, it's a shortened period of time and trying to get it out there, get the word out, call people, get them in, do the interviews. It will definitely be December's meeting.
If I may, I don't have an issue with an RFP, but here's my concern is that when we did this, I'll say 2 years ago, we if it wasn't a formal RFP, it was an informal RFP, and the local vendors were interested, but they were interested in marketing it at a lower price than the one that we ultimately selected. And then the school board took a lot of heat, social media and otherwise, because of picking a vendor from outside of town. But that vendor from outside of town turned to be more correct than the local vendors if it's strictly a matter of maximizing the value of the asset. So we don't release contracts to the lowest, to the highest supplier any more so than we should sell a piece of property to a lowest supplier. My concern is if we go back out to RFP and there's 3 local companies who want to say, we'll take it, and we think we should list it for $300,000. And then we have to make the decision that to maximize the asset, we still have to go back to the same person we've been working with.
Yeah.
We're going to have to go down that path all over again and take the exact same, getting beat up over using a company from Jamesville as opposed to using one from Watertown. And so I'm not saying that RFP is the wrong decision, but I also don't think that we're going to agree to list it with anybody who doesn't want to get us the maximum value for it, which should be in that 600 to 700 range, which Jared alluded to are probably the numbers that were bantered about 2 years ago of somewhere between 275 and 400. And
so
nobody should be wanting to sell it for that amount. And so, okay.
Right. David, I guess what I would say is if they came in with the amount that didn't align with the range that I know to be the range that we discussed and agreed to as a board in closed session, they would be disqualified, I guess.
Yeah, they'd be disqualified, but they wouldn't accept that as being a good reason.
I understand.
They would then run us through again for not using a local vendor, even though that they weren't prepared to get us the highest value for the product that we have.
I understand that, but they're choosing to work for us.
I recognize you understand that, Jared.
I know.
I'm stating it for the benefit of the other people on the board who have to make the decision. Going to RFP is not without its political casualties.
Can we state the asking price that we would be wanting to market it at in the RFP?
I could, yeah.
Just say, can we
that'd be reasonable. Then they could say, listen, we're not going to come to you and we're not going to bid in this RFP if we have to try to sell it for more than 600. That would let them
If
So,
they self-reflect out of it, then
that's right.
that's not on us. We say, this is what
Yeah.
we're gonna ask for, and you have to market it at this price. And they say, you're
That's right.
crazy, you know,
Yeah.
or this, I'll give it a try, and they fail, well, you gave it a try.
Yeah. And
I like that, Fred.
I believe the range that I was given was the Hovde number to basically the last listing price, right? So those are the ranges that I was given to look at and sort through. And who knows, maybe somebody will say, hey, I think you can sell it for even more than that now. That was, a year and a half ago.
Greg?
So, I mean, let's just say, for the sake of argument, everybody that's interested in listing it is comfortable with that. Then it really comes down to, who you feel is going to have the best, network
Yeah.
to list it.
Yeah, and or their percentage of take, right? They may say we'll list it and we'll only ask this much in return. So I've had anybody do a percentage of take to a flat dollar amount. So there is, don't cut that side short, especially on these larger dollar deals.
So my question to everybody tonight is, let's say we go to RFP, we find somebody else that wants to handle this property for us. Are we gonna run into the same challenges that we did this time in coming to the end of this deal? Or something's gonna be ironed out of our hands
If the property comes
completely?
in,
Right.
if the guy, the buyer comes in and he wants to change from what that property is zoned at, we're gonna run into that again. Cause they're gonna have to go to the city council, and they're gonna have to get it rezoned. And if the powers that be and the people who sit around that environment don't want that, well, then they're gonna argue against it, and you're gonna go back to the city council, or gonna go back to a vote. You can't, there's nothing to do with it. Unless we have
Yeah.
somebody to use it for what it's currently zoned at, there's nothing to do with that,
Which is still zoned
So-
as commercial industrial, right?
correct?
So
No,
really,
No, institutional.
it's institutional. Yeah. So
institutional-
can I give you a little bit of feedback? So the feedback I got, basically from members on the council, is it was a really close vote. What it came down to was density. If they had somebody come in with a different plan, maybe a little less density, or even more of a mix of single family and multifamily, it might have passed. And so I'm not saying that they would never say multifamily. They would never say multifamily, right? They said, first of all, it's who we got on the council now, and also the density was just too thick at the end of the day. And they had worked with the company to try to get lower and lower, and that was where it was at. And so they finally had to say no.
Yeah. My 2 cents on this, Mike, is that so as not to, I'll say, wake a sleeping bear, there's no reason to revisit this in the court of public opinion. I think we were happy with the broker that we had in the past. Going to RFP may make sense if we think that we might be able to bring it in-house, but then considering the downside and the very, very limited upside of, nobody's going to care that we switch brokers from Janesville to Watertown. That's not going to run in the paper or in the social media. And I don't think we're going to get a better rate. And I don't think we're going to get somebody committed to a higher selling price. In which case, for my 2 cents, I say stay the course, because nobody right now, that water is over the dam, and we've made that bed. We're laying in it, and people have already either forgotten or forgiven. So I'd rather just stay the course with the company that we've been working with, because they're familiar with us, they're familiar with the property, and they're familiar with some of the hair that might be on it.
Greg?
I understand, David's comments. I think they're valid comments about that, his perspective. I'm fearful of making the same decision mistakes potentially that got the flack in the past as well. But I differ on whether or not it's appropriate to, because this decision, well, this particular agenda and the meeting minutes are going to reflect this conversation. And when that's read in the paper, they're going to start questioning, why did you double down on that decision? And that's a reservation I have. And I still think it's probably good faith to put it out for an RFP. That's just my gut. But we should make it clear that we're gonna take the best qualified candidate, when it comes to the network that they present. And then that's the determining factor ultimately, and whatever their rates are. that are competitive.
And Craig,
Yeah.
no issue. We did that once. We went to RFP. Nothing's changed to my knowledge in the last 6 months, 18 months. We had the lowest rate, the entity that we thought was going to represent our interests the best. And there's zero cost to us to give local suppliers another bite at the apple. And I would love to use them, but we have to we have to state our criteria for award very clearly, in that a 53094 area code does not move you up in the selection process. And that just means that we could very easily end up right back where we are, and we just got to reopen the whole, the same, I don't call it a nightmare, but what we went through in the past. And it's okay that you and I disagree on this or have different perspectives. I appreciate yours, and I don't have any issue going back to RFP. I just mentioned that I don't see any upside. At best, we'll end up exactly where we are, and maybe it plays a little bit better in the paper. At worst, we take the exact same political storm we took the last time. So so with that, I'll say I'm indifferent. Jared, you heard my opinion on it. I don't even know if we need a board resolution on this, because it's an order in hand. It's a contract that we're sitting on, or at least it's probably underneath your discretion to renew it without even board action. Yeah, it's so if you want our guidance, if you want our guidance, it's 1-to-1 right now.
Well, and honestly, I would like clear guidance.
Yeah, there you go.
And honestly, exempt from clear guidance, I'm going to say then there's no impetus to change, and I will go with who we currently have. I'm just trying to see if there is a reason to change, what that would be, so that I have clear guidance and I can move forward.
Sam, do you have, we've heard from Dave and Craig, what are your thoughts?
This is a project that started long before I came to the board. And I can definitely understand where Craig and Dave are both coming from, as far as I've seen the process going on. I can't really say that I feel strongly one way or another about it, just because it started so long before my time here. So not trying to. Yeah, I would say that what's the phrase that you used a few months ago, David? Defer to the majority of the committee.
Sure.
That's what I'll say.
I may have said that.
So, I agree with both as well, Craig. I'm gonna tell you right now, anytime we can use local, I am 100% bought in. I think that's gotta be number one, or community members to help build, or whatever it might be. However, I definitely don't wanna open up another storm. I get that the minutes will be read and things like that. But I feel it's less of a bump than a full RFP. Now that's an opinion. I could be 100% wrong on that. So what I'm hearing, Jared, unless any board member wants to correct me, is we're kind of indifferent in putting it right back in your lap. And are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I shared with you guys, if there wasn't enough impetus to change, we would stay in basically extending the contract that we're doing. And so I appreciate at least the conversation, the discussion points, because there has been some feedback in the community. And I just wanted to make sure that I am doing due diligence again to check into my governing board. It sounds like there's not pressing impetus to change, so I will just continue moving forward as directed by the board earlier.
Fair enough. Um, then we will go to the planning calendar.
I'm gonna
Great.
check out for the rest of the day. You guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have your hand up according to planning calendar?
It's,
If I missed
I'm
it.
not worried about it.
Okay.
You know, I understand the rationale and the decision, that's the decision, you know.
Yeah, no, I completely, I'm on the fence as well. I get it. So the planning calendar, so when we look at this, coming up in November, we have auditor contracts. Anything else that we feel should be coming up in November?
I know we had talked about doing a final ESSER update. We can do that in November if you still want to, and then I'm sure we will talk about referendum again in November. Those are the only other things that I have.
Anything else? David, I'll start with you. Anything else you see? No? Greg?
Not that comes to mind right now, but there's a lot there.
Yeah, no, I get it. Sam?
No.
All right, if we could add those two things then to the planning calendar. And then we are to our last piece of business, and that is our monthly reports.
Yes, and I don't know if you want me to talk about any of that, or if anybody has any questions.
I guess, we're seeing a month over month uptick in our Amazon report, some of those, and I guess I just don't. It's hard to try to monitor or try to wrap my mind around it. And one thing that I had mentioned before was there's any way to know what particular fund, some of the spending, whether it's on our credit card statement, our check statement, what those are coming from, I think. So that, I know that, okay, this money was designated for that purpose. And,
So you want the account number that it's going to?
no, sorry, I don't need to convolute things, but for instance, what fund is being used for those particular purchases typically would be helpful if
You mean like Fund 10?
right.
I know Amazon is a little bit, there are Fund 21 purchases in Amazon, and it's really hard the way that the Amazon report comes out. If it specifically says Fund 21, I usually will take it out, but most of them don't say one way or the other. So it's hard to know exactly which one is which. I don't know for the check listing. I guessing, oh, what am I saying? It says on the check listing what fund it's in when I look at it right now. So if you go to the check listing and you look over to the far right columns, it actually shows the account number.
Okay. Sure. Well, I like that. I like that clarity. I appreciate that. So, yeah. And I guess that's probably one of the reservations I had to moving all the way over to Amazon purchases and from the beginning. Because I felt like the checklisting offered more resolution with, like, okay, these purchases were from this account and that purpose. You know, for instance, if there was a Fund 21 group within, Booster or whatever, boosters in their own town. Well, that's not a good example.
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, looks like this goes forward to resolution. And with that, our next meeting will be November 13th. Looking for a motion to say, let's get out of here.
Do we have any action items that I need to list out? Even?
The only ones, the ones I looked at is just moving forward to basically pay the bills, right? The referendum discussion, I guess, you mean never mind. Action items moving forward. Backing up to the beginning, we were talking with Craig, he was asking for, and David agreed, whether it's, I remember it's something, in the different buckets of money being spent, if we could break that out. What was
Like
that?
building level budget.
Yeah, building level budgets, yeah. Anything else that I missed?
Yes,
What did I miss?
item A will be going forward as on the agenda, for
Yeah,
the mosque quote.
yep. And that, you all understood that. I thought we were talking about, like, in addition to this, any action items for her
It's
to
just
bring.
kind of a recap, I think.
Just to recap? Okay,
Yep.
fair enough.
And then the referendum, moving forward with the, reoccurring referendum recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
All work, street property discussion, status quo, basically.
That was informational, kind of, is what it ended up being there,
Everything else is.
yeah.
Two items added, planning calendar.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. With that being said, we have ending at 7:08.